All right, so let's dive into this. President Biden's farewell address, his final speech from the Oval Office, just days before leaving office. After 5 decades in politics, the speech wasn't just a goodbye. It was a chance for him to try to, shape his legacy.
Right.
We've got a whole stack of news articles analyzing it, and it's really interesting to see how they each kind of highlight different aspects from his accomplishments to some pretty pointed warnings.
Yeah, it's almost like each article is a different lens focusing on a specific theme or message they find most compelling.
Yeah.
It definitely makes you think about how history will ultimately judge Biden's presidency.
Exactly. And one of the first things that jumps out at you is how much Biden emphasizes what his administration accomplished.
Yes.
Especially handling the pandemic, investing in infrastructure and clean energy, and strengthening democracy, both here at home and abroad.
That's a classic move in a farewell address, right? Highlighting those achievements he wants to be remembered for. It's Biden's attempt to paint a picture of his presidency, even though, as we know, no presidency is without its critics.
Right, and it makes you wonder, is he choosing these specific accomplishments strategically? Like, for example, he touts the recent ceasefire and hostage release between Israel and Hamas as a major foreign policy win, almost a parting gift. But, this has been an ongoing conflict throughout his entire presidency.
Right.
So is this really a significant achievement, or is it more about Biden trying to control the narrative as he exits?
There's definitely a strategic element to it. I mean, think about it. Achieving even a temporary ceasefire at this point, just days before leaving office. It allows him to end on a seemingly positive note.
Right.
But we also have to consider the motives of everyone involved. This is a genuine step towards peace in the region, or just a temporary pause, for political gain.
Okay, so there's more to the story than just a simple mission accomplished message.
Yeah.
But it wasn't all pats on the back, was it? Biden also issued some pretty stark warnings, especially about what he called the growing threat of oligarchy in America.
That's right. He expressed deep concern about the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a small elite, arguing that it undermines the very foundations of our democracy.
Yeah.
He even went so far as to call for tax reform to address the issue.
It's strong language for a farewell address, and
Yeah.
it makes you wonder if this is a new concern for him or something he's been thinking about for a while.
Well, remember, Biden has been in politics for decades.
Right.
He's seen firsthand how economic inequality has grown, how lobbyists and special interests influence policy, and how the average American seems to have less and less of a voice. He's tapping into a deep anxiety that many people feel about the direction our country is heading in.
So he's not just throwing out a random warning, he's connecting it to a much bigger and ongoing issue.
Exactly. And by framing it as a threat to democracy,
Right.
he's elevating the issue beyond just economic fairness. It becomes about the fundamental principles of our society.
Yeah.
Things like equal opportunity, a level playing field,
No.
and the idea that everyone has a chance to succeed.
And then, of course, there's the elephant in the room, or should we say the former president in the room.
Right.
Biden didn't shy away from criticizing Trump, even suggesting a constitutional amendment to hold presidents accountable for crimes committed while in office. That feels very different from how, say, Obama handled his farewell.
Yeah.
Do you think this signals a shift in how we approach these transitions of power?
It's definitely a departure from the traditional norms of these speeches. Remember, farewell addresses have historically been seen as moments to rise above partisan politics, to offer words of wisdom for the nation as a whole.
Yeah.
But just like we discussed with the ceasefire, there's a clear strategic element to Biden's criticisms.
Okay.
He's trying to solidify his own legacy by drawing a stark contrast with his predecessor. And you're right, this does seem to reflect a broader trend of increasing polarization in American society, where even these traditionally unifying moments become battlegrounds.
Yeah, it's like the gloves are off even in a farewell address. And then there was this other interesting twist, Biden's focus on artificial intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
He talked about it being potentially more consequential than any other technology and stressed the need for safeguards and for America to lead the way in its development. Why bring this up in a farewell address? It feels a little out of place.
That's what makes it so interesting, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't typically expect a departing president to focus so heavily on an emerging technology like AI.
Right.
But think about the implications that AI has the potential to revolutionize every aspect of our lives, from healthcare to transportation to, well, even politics.
Okay, so he's not just talking about cool new gadgets. He's talking about a fundamental shift in how we live and work.
Yeah.
But why the emphasis on America leading the way?
Well, remember, there's a global race for AI dominance right now. Countries like China are investing heavily in AI research and development. And there are concerns about who will control this technology and how it will be used.
Right.
By framing AI as a national priority,
Yeah.
Biden is sending a message that America needs to be at the forefront of this technological revolution.
So it's not just about technological advancement, it's about global power and influence.
Exactly.
It's almost like he's passing the torch to the next generation of leaders and saying, this is the challenge you need to face.
Exactly. And by highlighting both the potential benefits and the risks of AI,
Yeah.
he's encouraging a thoughtful and nuanced approach to its development. He's basically saying, this technology is coming, whether we like it or not, so let's make sure we shape it in a way that benefits humanity.
So we've got Biden highlighting his legacy, issuing stark warnings, taking aim at his predecessor, and suddenly pivoting to the future of artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
It's quite a mix for a farewell address.
It is.
But we also need to remember the unique circumstances surrounding this speech. Biden wasn't seeking re-election and faced a lot of pressure to drop out of the race.
Right.
How do you think that impacted his message?
That's a crucial point. This wasn't a triumphant, I'm running for another term speech.
Right.
It was a farewell from a president who, in many ways, was forced to step down.
Right.
That undoubtedly adds a layer of complexity to his words. There's a sense of vindication, maybe even defiance in his tone.
Yeah.
It's like he's saying, I did what I could despite the challenges, and now it's up to you to carry the torch.
Yeah, it definitely feels like he's trying to reclaim his narrative to define his presidency on his own terms. And some sources even describe his address as containing swipes at Trump, highlighting the tension between a traditional farewell and the current political climate.
Well, that's where things get really interesting. It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
These farewell addresses are meant to be these grand unifying moments where a president steps back from the political fray and reflects on the shared values of the nation. Yet Biden's speech, with its pointed criticisms and partisan jabs, seems to underscore the deep divisions that have come to define American politics.
It's like he's caught between two worlds. The tradition of a unifying farewell and the reality of a deeply polarized political landscape, and you can't help but wonder how this tension will shape his legacy.
Exactly. Will historians focus on his accomplishments and warnings, or will they see this address as a missed opportunity for true reconciliation and national healing?
Yeah.
It's too early to say for sure, but it raises an important question. Can we even have these unifying moments anymore, or are we destined to be perpetually divided?
It's a sobering thought, and it makes you think about the speeches of past presidents like Washington warning against the dangers of political factions, or Eisenhower cautioning about the military-industrial complex. Those were critiques of systems, not individuals.
Right.
They aimed to transcend the political battles of their time and offer guidance for the future.
You're right, those speeches were about principles, not personalities. Yeah. But in recent decades, we've seen a shift towards more personalized attacks, more direct criticisms of opponents.
Right.
It's like farewell addresses have become just another battleground in the partisan wars, reflecting the broader trend of increasing polarization in American politics.
So Biden's jabs at Trump are not an isolated incident, but part of a larger pattern of declining civility in our political discourse.
It would seem that way, yes.
And what does that say about the future of our democracy?
That's the million-dollar question. Can we have productive debates, respectful disagreements, when the level of animosity is so high?
Right.
It makes you wonder if we're losing the ability to engage in good faith dialogue across ideological divides.
It's a real concern. But shifting gears for a moment, I was struck by how some sources described Biden's departure as reluctant. It's almost as if he didn't want to leave the stage.
Right.
Given the pressure he faced to step aside, do you think this was a speech of defiance, a way to reclaim his narrative on his own terms?
There's definitely an element of that. Remember, he wasn't seeking re-election, and there were calls for him to make way for a new generation of leaders.
Right.
But here he is, using this platform to lay out his vision for the future, to highlight the challenges he believes we need to confront. It's like he's saying, don't write me off just yet. I still have something to contribute.
So there's a sense of vindication in his words, a desire to remind people of what he accomplished despite the obstacles.
Yeah.
But how do you think this reluctant departure will impact his legacy?
It's hard to predict. On the one hand, it could add a layer of poignancy to his story, the veteran leader who wanted to do more but was ultimately forced to step down. On the other hand, you could also feed into the narrative of him being out of touch, clinging to power, even when it was time to let go. Only time will tell how history will judge him.
It's interesting to consider how these different narratives will play out in the years to come. And speaking of the future, what about those warnings Biden issued about oligarchy and AI?
Right.
Do you think they'll have any lasting impact on American politics?
That's another big question. I think it depends on several factors, including who takes up the mantle of leadership after him and how these issues resonate with the broader public.
So it's not just about Biden's words, it's about whether those words spark action and inspire change.
Exactly. Farewell addresses rarely convert opponents, but they can serve as rallying cries for supporters, calls to action to continue the fight for certain principles or policies. So if there's a groundswell of public concern about oligarchy and AI, then Biden's warnings might have a real and lasting impact.
It sounds like we'll have to wait and see how these issues evolve in the coming years, but for now, let's turn our attention back to the speech itself. There's one thing that's been bugging me. We talked about how unusual it was for Biden to directly criticize Trump in his farewell address.
Yeah, definitely went against the grain of how these speeches have traditionally been done.
Exactly, but just how different was it? Have we always seen this level of direct criticism in farewell addresses, or is this a sign of something new?
That's a great question. It's true that farewell addresses have historically been used to offer warnings or critiques, but they were often more veiled, focusing on principles rather than personalities.
Right.
Think of Washington warning against the dangers of political factions, or Eisenhower cautioning about the growing influence of the military-industrial complex. These were critiques aimed at systems and institutions, not individuals.
So they were more about the big picture, the long-term challenges facing the nation, rather than settling scores with political rivals.
Precisely. But as we've been discussing in recent decades, we've seen a shift toward more personalized attacks, more direct criticisms of opponents.
Right.
Farewell addresses have become just another battleground in the partisan wars, reflecting the broader trend of increasing polarization in American politics.
It makes you wonder if we've lost sight of what these farewell addresses were originally intended for. Instead of being moments of reflection and unity, they've become just another opportunity for political point scoring.
It's a valid concern, but maybe there's still hope. Perhaps these farewell addresses, despite their flaws, can still offer us moments of reflection opportunities to step back from the daily political battles and consider the larger issues at stake.
Yeah, it's like trying to see the forest for the trees. We get so caught up in the personalities and the controversies that we forget about the underlying challenges facing our nation.
Exactly. And maybe by revisiting these farewell addresses, both the traditional and the more modern ones, we can gain a deeper understanding of our own political history and the recurring themes that have shaped our nation.
Yeah, it's like holding a mirror up to ourselves, both as individuals and as a society. And who knows, maybe by reflecting on these past speeches, we can find some guidance for navigating the challenges of the present and the future.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
After all, these speeches are addressed not just to political insiders, but to the American people as a whole.
Right.
They offer a unique glimpse into the minds of our leaders at a pivotal moment in their careers and in our nation's history.
It's a chance to hear their parting thoughts, their hopes and fears for the future, and maybe even glean some wisdom from their experiences. And as we wrap up this deep dive into Biden's farewell address, I think that's a good takeaway for our listeners as well.
Absolutely. It's so easy to get swept up in the headlines and the hot takes.
Right.
But it's important to step back and engage with these speeches on a deeper level. What resonates with you? What challenges you? What questions does it raise in your mind?
Exactly, because that's what makes this process so rewarding, right?
Yeah.
We're not just passively consuming information. We're actively engaging with it, trying to make sense of it, and forming our own opinions.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So before we sign off, we want to encourage you, our listeners, to seek out the full text of Biden's speech and compare it to some of the farewell addresses of past presidents.
Yeah, it's a great exercise in critical thinking and media literacy. See for yourself how different leaders have approached this moment of transition and how their words reflect the political climate of their time.
And as always, we encourage you to dive deep into the issues that matter most to you. There's a whole world of knowledge out there waiting to be explored.
So until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking those tough questions.
And never stop learning.